Hello and welcome back to Crew Call with the Scooters. I couldn't be more excited to have our next guest with us here today. We're huge fans of her. She's a friend of ours, Njaimeh Njie. Welcome so much here. We're so happy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So how are you? How are things going?
Things are going. I mean, obviously there's a lot of chaos in the world. Personally, I'm okay. I feel very privileged in a lot of ways, but it's definitely challenging to see the volume turned up on the many issues that we've been facing as like a country and the world.
Absolutely. It's a new year, but feels very similar so far to
It's kind of rolled into.
Exactly. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background, who you are, and we'll get into what you're doing now.
Cool. So I'm a multimedia producer. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. My dad is from the Gambia, West Africa. My mom is from Homestead, PA, but my sister and I were raised here in the city. I went to Pittsburgh Public Schools, and I went to college in St. Louis, and also stayed in St. Louis after undergrad to teach high school English. Taught for 3 years. After that, traveled for a little bit, and then came back to Pittsburgh, interested in exploring a career in media. And that's kind of evolved into me becoming an independent artist. And also, I run a production company called 11 Stanley Productions. And I am visual editor at Belt Magazine, which is a publication dedicated to telling stories about the Rust Belt by the folks who live here. So that's kind of.
You're not busy at all, is what you're telling
us.
us.
I mean, yeah, I have quite a bit of time to kick back.
No, that's incredible. So, growing up, was art like a big part, and arts and media a big part of your past and growing up here in Pittsburgh and with your family?
Yeah, I mean, art was always a central part of my life. I didn't necessarily grow up thinking I was going to be an artist, but my dad is a multidisciplinary artist. He's a painter, like a fiber artist. He makes clothes. He's a photographer. My mom is also like a freelance photographer, in addition to being an educator. So we were always, at performances, at gallery openings, just really entrenched in a creative community.
Now, going into education, did you think you would be doing art education at one point? When did you decide, after being there for 3 years, like, yeah, I want to kind of switch back and focus on the multimedia side of it more?
Yeah, so I majored in film and media studies in undergrad, but I didn't really see a clear path for myself in terms of how to like get into the industry. But I wanted to be connected to storytelling, and it felt like teaching English was a really cool and kind of powerful way to do that, while being able to, be with the youth and kind of hopefully pass something forward. So yeah, I incorporated art into my classroom, but never still thought I was going to be the one like making art.
Right. And so you come back to Pittsburgh and you say, okay, it's always at first, it's like, okay, how do I break into this? Is there contacts I know? Do I start my own thing? Like, how did you kind of develop into everything that you're doing today?
Yeah, it was kind of a crapshoot, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look back, it was all, I was just very fortunate in a lot of ways, but a family friend connected me to a local director, Ime Alaquiva, and I started like interning, apprenticing with his production company, and he actually encouraged me to start freelancing with one project in particular, and things just kind of picked up from there. An organization like a nonprofit would say, hey, we have this event coming up. Would you mind shooting it? And then I started approaching folks like, hey, I think this is a cool thing that you're doing. Would you be open to me shooting like a little promo piece for you? And that's how I got like hands-on experience, both producing and directing. And then that more kind of client-based work turned into a personal project called Powered by Grace, which was an exploration of Black women and girls' experience in Pittsburgh experiences.
That's incredible. And first of all, we're huge fans of MA as well. So he's a good connection and a great mentor on some of that side. So talk about that experience. So does it go back in history of the, um, you know, backing to like the historical side of Pittsburgh, the Black experience here in Pittsburgh, and what did you do for that? Did you interview friends and family? Did you go to archives? How did you kind of fully adapt that?
Good questions. So this was, I mean, my
Yeah.
very first project. So I actually applied for a grant and got it. That was the Advancing Black Arts in Pittsburgh grant. And so that allowed me to get a proper kit, like camera, a few lenses, tripods, sound equipment, everything. And so my background to that point was more in video, but it felt like photography would be a useful way to tell the story as well. So it ended up being a multi-pronged approach. I took portraits, like street portraits of Black women across the city. I mean, I would literally just hit the streets and ask, if I could make a portrait. And also I did little interviews, like little street interviews. I had my little Zoom recorder. And the question that I asked everyone was, what does Black womanhood mean to you? Mm-hmm. And then I made these kind of more like candid photos, kind of like documentary style, but friends, family, just like Black women living their everyday lives, and collected those like interview text snippets as well. And then the final portion of it was like a documentary series. So I did what ended up being a 5-part interview series with 14 Black women across the city about their backgrounds, about how they see themselves, how, they've gotten to be where they are. And yeah, each one was about 5 minutes. So it was kind of like digestible chunks. And then that all became like an exhibition and a website.
That's incredible. And I'm sure, everyone has their own different stories, but were you able to was there a commonality between everyone? I'm sure maybe it depended on, the generation maybe, or maybe it didn't. What did you find in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, I found that despite, everyone's individual backgrounds, there was just a shared pride and like joy in being Black women. And I thought that was really important to tap into because, even at that time, back in 2015, there were studies, there was this like really dominant narrative that being a Black woman in Pittsburgh is this really oppressive experience. And I think that we can have room for like a nuanced narrative. As difficult as it is and as many like external challenges as we face, we still find community with each other. We still, find great joy in being who we are. And I think that's important to share as well.
And that's great. And you've done since then so many projects and commission projects, but I'm sure projects on your own on like a social justice platform in terms of what you share. And you have an incredible way of showing that. I think that's relatable in terms of taking, like, I want to get into the homecoming, but taking, when I say relatable, places that we may know and showing something different on it, or showing something that maybe not everyone is aware of. How do you get inspired by that, or where does that come from? And I do want to talk a little bit about the homecoming project because it's such an incredible installation around Pittsburgh.
Thank you. I guess I just, I think I find myself coming back to some of the same ideas and even some of the same places that, I've grown up seeing and really thinking about questions that I've grown up having, like, within the city of Pittsburgh, how can two neighborhoods look so vastly different? How do we get here? And so I think my work is a lot about having those questions and then finding ways like visually or thematically to pursue those. So that's where a lot of like the landscape photography that I do comes in. But I also want to go to the source. Like I don't want to put my thoughts or like just put a historical narrative onto people. I think it's important to ask people, who they are, how they see themselves, what they're experiencing, and then make that a part of the historical narrative so that we're not just seeing this top-down story told about history and people.
And I'm sure people probably find that comforting because I'm sure it's a lot of times thought of as truth when you're really uncovering everyone's different truth of the matter, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we all have our individual
Yep.
experiences, but when you talk to enough people, you start to see those experiences are very much in conversation with each other. And, there might be a story written in a book, and that's cool, but oftentimes those stories come from people in power, come from people with visibility, and uh, it's not to negate that, but we have to add like everyday voices to the chorus as well.
And talk a little bit about that commission, because that was also the homecoming project. Was you did what the public art, Pittsburgh public art as well?
Right. So homecoming was is it's
Yeah,
finished, but was is
still there, right? Parts of it. I mean, three of the areas are still there, correct?
yeah, it was a public art commission through the Office of Public Art and Neighborhood Allies. And as an artist, I was paired and I guess technically selected by the Hill District community to create a community sourced temporary public art project. And so at that time, that was the first public art commission that I'd applied for, that I'd gotten. So I really wanted to approach it with an open mind. And the project was about developing something with the community, not me as an artist coming in and saying, hey, I have this plan,
Right.
let's do this.
Right.
So over the course of 3 years, I spoke to a bunch of residents. I was in the archives. I was taking pictures, just trying to get a feel for, like this resident-centered, people-centered story of the Hill, which is such a historic and such a revered community. But I just was trying to, I don't think you can ever have too many resonant voices,
Right.
brought into the narrative. So yeah, so the final project of that project was 4 public art installations that all like kind of visually explored this idea of home, like the Hill District as a home. And they featured Hill District residents, past and present, kind of joined together in these common spaces. And then I also built a website that acts as a digital archive. So it's a compilation of oral history excerpts, photographs that people donated, and it's also a digital map an interactive map that allows you to kind of explore the Hill from a spatial and narrative perspective.
That's incredible. And you really do have this more of like, it's very interesting, but you can see just from a couple of the projects you named, very collaborative approach to your work, it seems, which is, I think, something very different. Like you said, you don't come in and just say, here's what I'm doing. It's, I want to hear from you, and then I want to share your story, which is inspiring on that side of it. And that's where, are you inspired? Is there anyone that you've been inspired by or look to gather inspiration or just thoughts?
Ooh, that's a big question. I mean, I feel like, even just in Pittsburgh, I look around and I'm constantly inspired. I think just starting at home, my parents are very community-based people. And in the photographs that they take, just very much like hands-on, like in the community, preserving memories. So I think subconsciously I was probably influenced by that growing up. Obviously Teenie Harris, the great Teenie Harris. I grew up flipping through coffee table books, just poring over his images. I think of LaToya Ruby Frazier, another, genius photographer born and raised in the Pittsburgh region. And just so many of my peers. I mean, I could list off a list of probably 15 names of folks that are just doing incredible work. And just doing very generous and generative work. So I'm glad to be a part of this community.
And what do you think, and how do you think, art has changed or multimedia has changed even in the last few years? I mean, there's definitely been so much out there. What do you see that happening? Has COVID affected that? Just where do you think it's going, and how do you kind of navigate some of that?
Yeah, I mean, the media landscape has changed a lot in the past few years. I remember probably in 2014, I started a film series here called Pop-Up Premieres, just because I was watching a ton of web series
Mm-hmm.
by like Black content creators and producers. And that was around the time where, Black folks were really starting to kind of be a lot more present in like the mainstream film industry, the indie world, but also like the
Right.
mainstream film industry. And so it just seemed like there was a lot of energy and a lot of like really exciting content being made. And so I knew I was enjoying it. So I wanted to create something to share with others and kind of meet other young Black folks in that form. And so when I think back to 2014, 15, I think of like YouTube series and there just being a lot of excitement around video.
Yep.
And that was around the time where, like the Canon 5D Mark III came out. So the technology and like filmmaking capacity was being democratized. And I think we've seen that continue, but I also think of like BuzzFeed and
Yep.
Mike, there was just
Yes.
video everywhere.
Everywhere. Yes.
And I think that's changed quickly. I mean, I think a lot of big industry giants pivoted to video and then realized, oh, maybe this isn't what we thought it was going to be. So I think you see some people trying to go more into like the filmmaking, like proper filmmaking space, but that's complicated because with streaming and now with COVID and, theaters shutting down, it's kind of like a vast, like expense. Like, where does your film go if you make
Right.
it?
Right.
So it's a complicated time. Also, you see folks like Issa Rae, who started, we're watching her like on our little laptops on our beds, and now she has like HBO deals and she's like on the biggest screens. And so you see folks make that kind of journey and the trajectory change. But yeah, it just feels like there are a lot of paths, but they're all a little bit up in limbo right now.
It is. It'll be interesting to see. And how have you been affected by COVID? Have you had to change like what you're doing? I know, adjusting your life a little bit, the travel, just how's that affected you?
I mean, on a on a business level, I think most presciently, like I've had some projects be pushed back. Grateful that they haven't been like canceled outright, but the timeline has just been extended. So I'm glad to still be working. I've actually gotten a few opportunities and commissions that are like specific to COVID documentation, and kind of like thinking about this specific moment in time. So in that way, I feel very lucky to still be having opportunities. But again, it's still hard because you see so much suffering going on. So it's like everything is tempered a bit.
It is. And how inspired personally are you by what is happening in the world? I mean, this summer that was just, there was so much happening. Do you take some of that? Do you put it aside for something larger? Do you feel like you need to kind of get it out there and show what you're feeling? How do you kind of like work with like some of that, the social aspects of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, on a very basic level, there's just been a lot of time for me spent reflecting and, really thinking about, who am I in all of this? Like, what can I contribute? And I think to your earlier point, typically I've made work that articulates other people's feelings and experiences. I mean, in my own style, but I think I've thought a lot more about, okay, what do I think? How do I feel? And how can I share that? So I did a collage series earlier in the year that I think got at that a bit. And so I'd like to do more of that work more moving forward, even if it's just, on the side and no one sees it.
And what is coming up? I know you're working on some stuff right now, and what's coming up for the next year or even the next 2 years?
Yeah. A few commissions, a few like short film like commissions that I'm excited about, like a longer term photo essay, like photo documentation project. But yeah, among other things, but also my hands are full at belt.
I was going to ask that. How's it there? Is it busy? Have you been just busy pretty much around the clock there as well?
Yeah, it's been a pretty awesome experience so far. I came on board in October. So it's really just been a process of kind of like learning on the fly. But yeah, so far I've been able to publish 2 photo essays. One was like a collaborative piece between 5 of us Black women photographers across the Rust Belt about election week, the election week through our perspectives. And we just published a piece by a photographer, Njaimeh Njie, out of Grand Rapids. So I'm really enjoying that kind of work, getting to know other photographers and getting to kind of collaborate in a different way. And yeah, it's like cool. It's an exciting, different, but an exciting opportunity.
What an awesome opportunity to kind of, with the election and just everything, I'm sure just being with the other women and seeing their works and your works and how you guys can work together, I'm sure was an incredible experience. And hopefully more of that now that it's, you know, things are moving forward and new year, hopefully. So
yeah, it's cool at Belt to be a part of a team that is very like forward thinking and very much not necessarily, we don't necessarily do work that is like late breaking news, but there's a lot of, you know, historical work. There's a lot of like really great writing and thinking about like the region from many different aspects. And so it's exciting to just kind of be a part of something like that.
that's awesome. Well, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for spending the time. I know you have a busy schedule, but we really appreciate you and are big fans of your work. So thank you again, and enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.